Chapter 907, The Power of Mysticism. Most of Colleen City's buildings were built on paths that spiraled upwards. There would be squares or small towns in the middle, or on rather flat, open spaces. Klein carried his luggage, and with his spiritual intuition as a seer, he randomly chose a direction to proceed in and found a relatively lively bar along the way. There weren't many carriages on the streets, and the rental types were a rare sight. The most popular means of transportation in East Balham was a coffin. This stemmed from their traditions of worshipping death. People viewed coffins as items that brought about serenity and peace. Therefore, Klein often saw people walking past him carrying a black coffin. The lids were lighter than the usual kind and were just like a carriage door that could be opened at any time. They're carried via 2, 4, or either people, or by horses or single-horned goats. Such a tradition is quite terrifying at night. It's not much better in the day. The entire city feels dark and creepy. Klein took in the scenery around him as he walked into the square. On the left was a cathedral of the Lord of Storms, and on the right were restaurants and bars. When he stopped in his tracks, a coffin being carried by 4 men was also lowered. As the lid was opened, the passenger inside the coffin stood up and took a step forward. He was a Northern Continent-style gentleman dressed in a white shirt and black vest. The gentleman's formal coat was slung against his arm, something he wore only after he left the coffin. Then, Klein saw the man head straight for the Lord of Storms Cathedral and enter it. This sure is quite discordant. Doesn't the Church of Storms enjoy changing the traditions of the colonies and forcefully implementing those of Lone? Why don't they do that in East Balham? Is it because the Death Pathway and Evernight Pathway are similar, so the Church of Storms wishes to preserve some of the traditions of death worship, so as to curb the proliferation of the Church of Evernight? Klein nodded in thought as he turned to the buildings on the right, prepared to enter one of the bars there. Having experienced it personally, he came to the realization as to why the dressing style of the ancient Balham Empire was written as such in so many history books. They enjoy wearing trousers, those that are light and breezy. They find creases beautiful. Isn't this to make it easier to lie in a coffin when outside? Klein shook his head with a smile as he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Squeezing through the drunkards, he walked towards the bar counter. And at this moment, the 2 military followers had deliberately opened up a distance from Dwayne Dance to prevent themselves from being exposed. They had walked to the door side. Taking this brief reprieve, Klein suddenly switched directions and passed through the crowd like a fish in water, heading straight for the bar's back door. Although he didn't know Dutonese, he could read drawings on signs and knew where the washrooms and places where entry was forbidden to customers. After circling to a blind spot from the door, Klein quickly took off his coat and slung it on his arm. Immediately, with his golden cane, he reached out his palm to cover his face and slow down his pace. Turning directions again, he headed for the bar's entrance. After opening up a distance of nearly 10 meters from where he took off his coat, Klein lowered his face-shielding right hand to reveal a completely different face. His white sideburns, deep eyes, and elegant demeanor was all gone. He had switched to a common Lonese face that could be seen anywhere on the northern continent. With luggage and cane in hand, Klein walked staidly towards the 2 military followers. As they were looking for Dwayne Dance, he walked past them and left the bar. Be it tracking or anti-tracking, they were both strong traits of a faceless. Returning to the square, Klein turned into a sloped alley that led to higher ground. He planned on finding a hotel elsewhere. As he walked on a rather deserted path, he suddenly heard a woman's frantic cries. The voice was only maintained for a very short moment before it was silenced. Although he didn't know what she was shouting, Klein could sense the horror, fear, and panic in her voice. Hence, he switched directions and entered a narrower and more deserted trail. In less than 10 seconds, he saw a local man in his 30s who was pressing against a 13 or 14-year-old girl in a secluded corner and was using violence against her. His skin was brownish, and he had rather soft facial features. Klein took a glance and slowed down his pace before stopping in the nearby shadows. At this moment, the girl's face was extremely horrified and distorted. However, regardless of how she struggled, she was unable to free herself and had only received a beating in response. Her tears and snot flowed out while her mouth was stuffed with cloth. All she could do was produce muffling sounds. At this moment, she was surprised that the rotten eggs' attempts to take off her clothes had slowed down. Without having the time to consider what was happening, she subconsciously looked at the rotten egg and found that his eyes had widened. His facial muscles were writhing slowly, but he was unable to form a complete expression on his face. Then, his limbs twitched and paused as they continued doing what they were doing but were easily avoided. The girl instinctively pushed him, which had ended up having surprisingly excellent results. Freed, she immediately stood up and fled. However, she couldn't help but feel her legs go limp. After a few steps, she tripped over a stone and nearly fell to the ground. At this moment, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Reeling in anxiety, she fumbled to her feet. But almost immediately, the sounds of footsteps suddenly ceased. The girl subconsciously looked back only to see the rotten egg standing 2 meters away. His joints were making strange actions as though they were rusted. What's happening? The girl felt as though she was having a nightmare. The brown-skinned man struggled for a moment before quietening down. Revealing a smile, he said in Dutanese, "In the future, when you meet someone like me, remember to head for the nearest cathedral or somewhere where there's plenty of people." The girl was taken aback for a moment before she screamed. Turning around, she ran as fast as she could. Subconsciously, she chose to run in the direction of the square where the cathedral was. When the calm and silence of the deserted spot was restored, the brown-skinned man turned to look at the nearby shadows where Klein walked out from. A new marionette? His body isn't strong enough and he's not nimble enough. He lacks beyonder powers and looks rather fierce. Apart from knowing Dutanese, he's completely useless. Klein simply evaluated. If it wasn't because he was committing a crime and that I wasn't proficient in the local language, I would have buried him immediately. He couldn't help but make a comparison with his former marionette, Admiral of Blood Senner. Senner was a wraith and was capable of mirror blink. He could hide in gold coins and reflective surfaces. I didn't need to worry that he would be seen by others. He also had shriek and the ability to possess others. Together with a marionettist, it's a perfect combination. More importantly, he also knew Dutanese. Comparing this marionette and him is like the difference between a penny and 42,000 gold pounds. I've no idea what his name is, and I can only use powers to sense some superficial thoughts. I have no way of obtaining deeper memories unless I encounter someone or something familiar. There would be a corresponding change in the spirit to release more information. I'll just call him Ah Fu. Ah, no, that's too Chinese. Oaf it is. Klein rubbed his temples and sighed. He needed to leave the area with his new marionette, Oaf, before the girl led the clergyman over. Before long, with the help of his marionette's translations, he found an inn to stay in at the border between Colleen City's flourishing and backward area. This place didn't need him to provide any proof of identity, even though Klein had already changed his appearance to that of a regular local. There's an even greater lack of administration management than the colonies at sea. Klein put down his luggage and threw most of the cash he brought with him above the gray fog, leaving only £50 for his daily expenses. Meanwhile, having crossed the Berserk Sea, and without needing to be afraid of causing any further anomalies, he took down the copper whistle and iron cigar case from the mysterious space above the gray fog so as to make it easier for Mr. Azek to locate him. After finishing all of this and having had dinner on the liner, he had the spare time to seek out his second marionette. As for how he could find one, Klein, who didn't understand Colleen City well enough, decided on using his traits as a seer and do so with mysticism means. With Oaf, he left the inn. Klein snapped a branch of a Donningsman tree and used it as a dowsing rod. With great familiarity, he used cogitation and muttered, "Location of my new marionette." In the silent environment, pairs of cold eyes seemed to pierce through the obstruction of the incorporeal and the corporeal, and landed on the dowsing rod. The branch fell to the ground and pointed in a direction. After advancing forward a little, he did another divination and followed his new revelation. 7 to 8 turns later, he arrived at a steep staircase. This staircase was connected to many roads in Colleen. One had to look up to see the top, and there was no one at all. The divination's revelation is pointing here. Why isn't there anyone here? The result isn't accurate because I didn't do a divination above the gray fog, but I'm already a sequence 5 Mariontist. My divination abilities are definitely one of the best below that of high sequence beyonders. Klein frowned slightly as he surveyed the area, but he failed to find any targets. After some thought, he walked towards the staircase and sat in the shadows of the lowest step. He then waited in boredom despite a lack of confidence. After a few minutes, he stood up again and made Oaf sit where he was sitting. Then, Klein opened up a gap from him and hid 200 meters away in a hidden spot. Colleen City, Lower Lip District. Leonard Mitchell and Dolly Simone arrived at a nearby district with the Red Gloves team captain, Soest. With the night as cover, Soest emphasized the operation to all the members once again. Our target this time is Ulika, who's living at Unit 13. He's a rather important member of the numinous episcopate and is in charge of communicating with the different small teams in Backland. Although all our intelligence points to him not being a demigod, I have applied for a Grade 1 sealed artifact to be safe. Her Excellency, Goddess's Eye, is also ready to provide her assistance to us at any time. Also, most of the residents of this district are locals. We have to be wary of them also being members of the numinous episcopate.